Well, ladies, it's wonderful to have you on this stage to talk about an issue that I have been really personally passionate about, which is the intersection. And I think today, more than ever, policy and the impact that it has on our industry is stronger than ever. But as a way of introduction, perhaps, shall we start with just a description of your organization's role and how it connects with all of these different pieces? Isabel.
I'll start?
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. I am the director of the National Travel and Tourism Office, and we produce the national statistics on travel and tourism for the United States and its contribution to the economy. We use that data then to create a positive business climate for growth of this industry. In short, we work for you. We use that data to influence policy on things like reopening travel for in the context of the pandemic, or previously in the context of terrorism. So we use that data to influence public policy. We also have a National Travel and Tourism Advisory Board. Some of your community are members of that. We have Expedia and Travelport and Airbnb, all members, Google, along with others, who basically help us understand what it is you need out of the government. And then we take that to an interagency council of all of the agencies whose policies reflect your needs. That is to say, the Department of State, the Department of Homeland Security, the Department of the Interior. And we coordinate through a national travel and tourism strategy the policies and programs that support growth. And this is an ongoing process. So that's what we do.
Well, Visit Lauderdale is the destination management organization for Broward County, which is where you all are. Our job is to market and promote tourism, to bring people here to Greater Fort Lauderdale. We are a government agency. I work for Broward County. I report to the county administrator, which can make it a little difficult at times. Public sector has rules and regulations that you may not find in the private sector. So, for example, it can take 2 years to get an RFP through to hire a marketing agency. And we all know that this business has to be nimble and flexible. That makes for some challenges, but we think we do a pretty good job. That was one of our videos you saw just now. We recently rebranded to be Visit Lauderdale from the Greater Fort Lauderdale Convention Center. And we make sure that we bring millions and millions of people here to spend lots and lots of money to keep our small businesses open so people can put food on their families' tables.
Thanks, Stacy.
So my role is a little bit different. I work at Bloomberg Associates, which is a pro bono consulting firm that works with cities around the world. So we have several different groups. I work on the tourism side. So my job is to work with tourism agencies in different cities and just really jump in and help them on whatever they need, which can be policy, it can be a strategic plan, just kind of anything. So I'm in an interesting position where I'm not really government and I'm not really industry, but I'm kind of there in the middle.
Wonderful. So here we are at Phocuswright for myself, and I think a lot of people, the first conference that we're attending in the post-pandemic world. So let's talk about this dynamic and sometimes conflicting elements of economics and bringing business back and health and safety. So Isabel, let's start with you. How have you thought about the balance of these things and working through all of your partners at the federal government on these issues?
Yes, I've thought of little else for a while. And, you know, there's no question that safety is always first. And I think that's true in the private sector, it's true in government. But I think where we have landed is, over the years, we have developed a culture of trying to find the sweet spot that does both. So what we sought in the policy of reopening the United States to international travel was a policy that both made our country safer from the importation of disease and also facilitated travel. And so we, you know, had originally started with a geographic travel restriction system, but that actually is not particularly effective on the health side. And so what we have arrived at is an individual risk-based system that applies to everybody around the world and monitors and assesses the individual risk of that person bringing in a disease into this country, specifically COVID. And I think that's where we are, and I think that's where we need to be. So I think that it is really coming to the process of reframing the question and not necessarily saying, is it this or is it that, but seeking, if at all possible, to find a place where you can do both.
Excellent. Now, Stacy, in Florida, it's been an interesting ride. Love to hear your perspective on it.
Well, Florida is the only state in the union which had 0 COVID restrictions from a statewide perspective. So this is not my first conference since reopening because Florida took an approach that some might consider imbalanced and fell on the economic side as opposed to the health side, because we have to remember that over 55,000 Floridians lost their lives so far and counting with COVID. But Broward County is a very responsible county. And as a government agency, we created our own Safe and Clean pledge, which we put out to our partners, not just tourism partners. They weren't just restaurants and attractions and hotels. We have moving companies that have signed up for our Safe and Clean pledge, and what it was a pledge from those industries that they would follow CDC guidelines. And then they would post that on their businesses to let their guests know that they took the safety of their guests very seriously and that they were complying with the guidelines that were promulgated by the Centers for Disease Control. That's what we could do because we were restrained from doing anything further by the state.
So one of the things that I think we're all really excited about, it's maybe not the sexiest topic, but infrastructure. The president this week signed into law a $1.2 trillion infrastructure deal. I was fortunate enough to have a sit down with Roger Dow and have a chat about it. And I'd love to play that clip now as he walks us through what the key elements are that will benefit the travel industry. Play the clip, please. Could you play that video, please?
Key components are, as we finally stop kicking the can down the road. There's never anything perfect with every bill, but this is a huge boon for the travel industry to really give us the infrastructure investment that is needed. And it really coming out of the pandemic is going to really map out the future for this industry, which I believe is going to come back stronger than ever, despite what some of the prognosticators say. $66 billion is in the bill for rail going to Amtrak, and it's going to focus on the Northeast corridor, which you and I know is the densest corridor. And if you could get high speed going there, I think it'll really set the tone for the rest of the country. And there's a lot of other things in the bill. I'll just go hit a few. $15 billion for airports, $110 billion for roads and bridges, $40 billion for bridge repair and replacement, $11 billion for senior citizens to make things safe for them and cyclists and pedestrians. There's also money in there, as I say, for airports, the ports of entry, $40 billion. So a lot of money that we've never seen before, and it is really going to be a game changer. As I said, no bill's perfect, but this comes a long way from nothing that we've had for the past decade.
So huge influx of funds, incredible opportunity to, as they say, build back better. But one of the things that I worry about a little bit is the potential for these funds to get locked up in local politics because they flow through grant systems and things like that. And we've seen in history has shown that some projects just don't get off the ground because they get stuck in that. So I think, Stacy, this is a great question for you as you sit in the balance of that. What are your thoughts on what to expect? And what advice do you have for the industry to support the efforts that are so important that might get stuck in local politics?
Well, I don't think that any of us has read this bill from cover to cover, including the people who voted on it, I might say. But there's no question that it will have a positive impact. My hope is that the federal government has decided to pass and implement a law that will allow the money to go directly to the locals, the counties, or the cities, as opposed to stop at the state, because that's just one more layer of bureaucracy to clog up, and your project will get delayed that much more. And in fact, we've all seen that because of the unintended consequences of COVID, we've got supply chain issues, we've got labor issues. Our own convention center, which is under a renovation, we're building an 800-room Omni hotel there. The price of the hotel has gone up a third in the past 18 months. Having said that, thanks to the American Recovery Act, $140 million is going to that project. So thank you. I mean, it's our money anyway, really, at the end of the day. But it's nice to have it come back to your community. And for tourism, look, I live here in Broward County. I live in Fort Lauderdale. The roads need work. We are the Venice of America here, and we have lots of waterways with lots of bridges. And I travel over those bridges and worry that they're okay. So when you can say to your community, when we can bring tourists here and market to the community that we are a 21st century, really a 21st century destination with 21st century roads and 21st century bridges, 21st century rail, an airport and a seaport that rivals something that you would see in Dubai or China, that can only have a positive impact on being able to market and promote your destination. But it also, of course, helps the people who live here too.
Yeah. So politics in the United States has sort of reached fever pitch, I think. But Margo, politics obviously around the world, different cities are grappling with their own. What sort of examples do you have of maybe cities who have worked through some of these issues around the world?
Wow. One of our client cities is Milan. It was, of course, kind of the epicenter at first for COVID, and they have done a really good job of now repositioning themselves as one of the safest destinations to travel to for a multitude of different reasons, but they've really kind of attacked, it's not a great word, but they've really gone after that negative image to make sure that they've turned that around. And they did that within their city. I think an important point that you made, it's important that cities and very local governments kind of control what's going on in their world because they know best. And they've worked really well with also the regional government and then the national government to focus on Milan and turning that image around because it really affected Italy as a whole as well.
Yeah, for sure. So how much does politics really impact tourism at the end of the day? I mean, I think there are some really stark examples of, when it directly is tourism-related policy, but then also, social policy and things like that. So what has been your experience and observations on that topic?
Well, of course, I work at the national level, and what I would say, generally speaking, is that with respect to travel, it doesn't necessarily affect the consumer that much unless there is actual, unrest. Whether somebody is a red state or a blue state is not usually a determining factor from the demand side. Where there is a notable difference is on the international level, and that is with respect to the use of outbound travel and tourism by China. Because only Chinese companies are allowed to sell outbound travel to Chinese travelers. And the Chinese government has huge influence on that process. So when a country does something that displeases the Chinese, then they have been known to use this as, essentially a soft weapon. And, you can ask South Korea, Taiwan, Palau. And I think to that degree, politics can severely affect travel and tourism because China is such an important source market for so many countries. So that's on the demand side. On the political side or the governance side, what I have found is that those dynamics are really interesting from the standpoint of how we continue to make progress from the Bush administration to the Obama administration to the Trump administration to the I have found it very interesting, and this is where I think data-driven economic policy is very often the meeting point for so many because every administration wants to create jobs. Every administration wants to do better, particularly economically at the corporate level and at the level of the community as well. So I think politics has a tremendous influence on all of this, and policy matters.
Absolutely.
And one of the things I'd like to point out, too, with respect to policy mattering is that there's a lot of money in this infrastructure bill for broadband,
Yeah,
which is really going to affect this community a lot as well.
absolutely. And Stacy, you have some concrete examples of lost business because of policies that have happened. How have you navigated some of those challenges?
Look, you do the best you can with the cards that are dealt, but yes, it is true. When the legislature last year passed and the governor signed the transgender bill, which prohibited those who are trans from playing sports in their defined gender, their self-defined gender, we lost 2 conferences the next day, 2 LGBT plus conferences the next day. And it is very difficult to separate yourself from a state, how you are painted as a state. But when you do that, when you boycott, I've done it in my mind, I'm not going there anymore because they did this. You realize that this country is so divided that whether you go to a red state or a blue state, there are red areas and blue states and blue areas and red states, and somebody there is going to feel like you do, and somebody there is going to feel the exact opposite of you do. But when you boycott, you hurt small businesses, mostly small businesses. The best jerk chicken in Lauderdale, in Lauderdale in Broward County, you're hurting that woman-owned or minority-owned business when you don't go to a place because you don't agree with their state politics or their state policies. Because at the end of the day, it's the people that count. It's the people who live in the community who count, who matter, and who need that business. So you separate it, and you do things like ensure that your customers, your clients, your visitors are safe, feel safe, whether that is COVID safety or pre-pandemic safety, which used to be, violence in the streets or getting mugged on the beach. You just make sure that you can separate yourself and get the message out that as a community asset, people need to come here because you need to keep your community growing. A community that doesn't evolve and grow dies. And if you're a tourist-based destination as we are and tourists don't come, then you start to die.
Right. So looking ahead, we're all so focused on recovery and supporting recovery, and we have a whole suite of challenges ahead of us, from labor issues, the disease itself and the variants and the potential of another sort of bubble up, and then, sort of the economy in general. You have inflation, rising prices, and then specific to travel, we have this issue of corporate demand really falling off a cliff, at least in the near term. What do you think of as the biggest challenge ahead, and how do you sort of think through planning for and through these challenges? Isabel, let's start with you.
Well, I don't know that I can go with biggest challenge because they're co-equal in their complexities. In the near term, I'm very concerned about labor. I think that this industry in particular needs to take a very close look at some of the data that's coming out. Specifically, I would say what's referred to as the quit rate, the rate at which people are leaving various sectors. The quit rate in the United States right now, as we all know, is high across all sectors. It is double in the hospitality sector. And I think that the industry needs to take a very close look at why that is. What are the drivers? And I mentioned our Travel and Tourism Advisory Board. We do have a working group, including labor unions and businesses, who are looking at these questions. And it does seem to me that that in order for us to provide the kind of world-class customer experience that we want to provide at every level, that this relationship has to be, redesigned, and I hope that happens. In the longer term, I think that we need to recognize that COVID has presented an existential problem to this industry. Every other shock has been sort of immediate and a recovery, whether it's 9/11 or hurricanes or whatever. And I think that we have to look at the fact that these shocks are not going to be immediate anymore, and that there are other serious existential problems out there, and I would say climate. I think that the industry perhaps needs to look much more carefully at asset risk around the coastal areas, what's happening with severe weather. And we need to not only look at the causes, decarbonizing, et cetera, but I think we also need to look at mitigation and what we are going to be doing with those assets that are and businesses that are at risk today. And that's sort of my two.
Thank you. Stacy, what are your thoughts?
Labor, certainly, but in conjunction with labor, transportation. We are a very large county, 2 million people live here. If you have to travel an hour and a half to get to work and take 2 buses and start at 5:30 in the morning to make your shift at 9 o'clock or 8 o'clock, that's a problem. And it's no wonder that people are quitting, because they don't want to have to deal with that work-life imbalance any longer. So there is that issue. I also think that it is long past time for the hospitality industry in general, but hotels and restaurants specifically, to rethink their models. You can't put people in a kitchen for $10 an hour, have them work 12 hours on their feet, and expect them to be happy and satisfied. And again, it's no wonder people are staying home and have chosen to do that instead of busting their butts for very little, not enough money to pay their rent and their other bills. And this place has become an incredibly expensive place to live. It used to be one of the cheapest places to live. Now it's one of the most expensive. So I think that all of those issues have come to the fore because of COVID. And those conversations should have been taking place a year and a half ago or 5 years ago, and they have to take place now. For the long term, I think COVID is here to stay unless more people get vaccinated. And the only way that we can get back to business and life as we know it is for the vaccination rates to go up, and for us to be a leader, for the U.S. and the state and my home state to be leaders in that space.
I agree with Isabel that climate change is going to be a big factor going forward, no matter how you slice it. And maybe it's because I work more internationally, but the COVID variants are the biggest factor for us. This is the uncertainty. Like, I don't want to book a vacation if I know it can get canceled for no reason in a week. Not no reason, but in a week. And so I think, at least for our international travel, those variants and the uncertainty that comes along with that are just going to keep being a barrier, I think, for the near to medium term future. And to Stacy's point, once there's more vaccinations and it's a little more safe to travel and people feel more comfortable, hopefully that'll start to change.
But I'd also say that these issues are not unlinked. As the climate changes, we are going to see many more pathogens. Mm-hmm. And so I do think that one of the things we also need to look at is how the public and private sector can work together to be able to manage this travel process in the face of new pathogens. We need better detection. We need better systems. We can't just think that this is a one-off and that we're going to somehow get back to more normal and it'll all be okay. We will have missed a tremendous opportunity to really, I think, create, if you will, virtual barriers for travelers.
So on the one hand, recovery can't come soon enough, but at the same time, resorts are already overflowing. And we are in this weird position where we have, cities, really struggling to recover, and resort areas that are dealing with so much overcrowding and over-tourism. Stacy, your perspective on this, I mean, you're at the epicenter of some of these challenges.
I wish that I had started to write in a journal a year and a half ago what this path would look like, because nobody would believe what we've been through. 2020 was so devastating. In 2021, the numbers have been better than they were in 2019, which was a record year for us. And we are very grateful for that, very grateful for that. But Broward County has prepared for climate change for a very long time, and has a sustainability plan in conjunction with Palm Beach County, Miami-Dade County, and Monroe counties. We are 4 of the most, what's the word? We are in the middle of what could be in 2050 a very, very different looking coastline. Yeah. So we have prepared for that, and we do not expect the kind of issues that we've seen in Venice with either over-tourism or not having a plan on how to we are prepared for climate change here. We have done an incredible job in Broward County, and those of us who live here should be very proud of that fact.
Can you give us some more details about?
Well, whether it's seawalls, whether it's using making your seawalls more durable, or whether it is moving your residential neighborhoods more in westward away from the coast, not allowing development on the coast any longer, things like that. Because if you look at the map in 2050, if things don't change, right now where we are, we'll be underwater.
Yeah. What about internationally? What have you seen other cities around the world do to tackle some of these challenges?
So Milan is another city that's really trying to confront climate head on. Their mayor is really focused on that. They want to make sure that not only for their residents that they're making their city more livable, but they know it's important for their tourism goals as well. People really are going to care about that. You used Venice as an example. I think that over-tourism is a big problem, obviously for a lot of cities like that. And it's a double-edged sword whether you limit that. Are you going to lose jobs and tourism? You will. You are going to lose jobs. You're going to lose small businesses, but you also want your residents to be happy. I mean, that's the job of government at the end of the day. So how do you strike that balance of what's the magic number of people that can be in my city, but also sustain my businesses and my residents?
Ladies and gentlemen, Isabel, Stacy, Margo, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you.